It's okay to feel afraid and then do the hard thing anyway. Hi, welcome to Expat on a Budget. I am Kimberly Ann. This is podcast number 40. So this topic is someday versus now in the dream of moving abroad. How long have you dreamed of living abroad? And how many times have you said to yourself, I've always wanted to move to another country, but ... Insert excuse here. The dream of living in another country is common, but in reality, those who actually do it are few and far between. And I want to talk honestly about waiting, about readiness, and why sooner might be better than later. As I have mentioned in the past, I wanted to leave the United States for at least 10 years, probably longer, before I took the leap. I researched for years. I read International Living's yearly guides. I followed other expats. I read their stories. I talked incessantly with my friend Hillary about moving to Costa Rica after her son graduated. And all of that is well and good. I love dreaming. I love the planning phase. I love all of that. It's a huge part of the pre-production of moving. And sorry, I have a film background, so that's why I use pre-production. But even now in Portugal, I'm still fantasizing about my future. It's normal, it's healthy. I don't know if I'm going to stay in Portugal. I don't know if I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't know if I'm going to stay in Porto. So I often think about and fantasize about where I might want to move if I was going to change where I live now. But if you're serious and you want to move beyond the dreaming stage, don't stagnate. Don't let other things hold you back. There will always be reasons. There will always be excuses. Always, always, always. So a little personal backstory, and it's a little bit painful, is I wanted to have a baby at one point in my life. It was after I had a really horrific miscarriage. Before I had that miscarriage, before I was pregnant, I had never considered it. I actually didn't want to have children. And the hormones of pregnancy made me change my mind. And I was speaking with a friend and I said, it's probably not the right time. I'm probably not earning enough money yet. Well, I wasn't earning enough money yet at that time. And my friend said, don't wait because the money will come. And I went to my OBGYN and he said, don't wait or it'll be too late. And you know what? I waited and it was too late. So I turned to adoption. I spent, and I know this is ridiculous, but it is what it costs in the US. I spent $25,000. I went through a myriad of in-depth interviews and multiple home visits. Through a year and a half, I went to a battery of different classes, and I was finally picked by a 16-year-old girl named Destiny. Destiny had become pregnant by a 14-year-old boy. It was her second child, and she confided to me that she had given up all of her hopes and all of her dreams to raise the first baby completely on her own. Each child had a different father, and the fathers wanted nothing. I mean, if they can be called fathers, or 14, and the other one I think was 13, they wanted nothing to do with raising the children or contributing financially to the life of the child. And Destiny's mother kicked her out of the house when she became pregnant with her first child to fend for herself. The young mother told me that she couldn't possibly raise two children on her own. She said she wanted a better life for her daughter. And when I asked her what she would name her second baby if she could choose the name, she actually said, Unwanted. It was just one of the many gut-wrenching moments that I witnessed throughout this painful situation. As I was feeding the baby, who I named Shaylin, in the hospital, Destiny changed her mind and canceled the adoption. And it wasn't just her that changed her mind. It was all of her. It was pretty crazy. I watched it happen. She didn't want anything to do with the child for the first 24 hours. And I was feeding the baby. I was changing the baby. I was doing everything and sleeping with the baby, everything. And then her family started coming in, and the I don't want to say sperm donor because that's rude, but the father of the child, the 14-year-old father's family, the 14-year-old never showed up. The boy never showed up, but his family showed up. And they were hounding her, and they were telling her some horrible untruths about how her baby would grow up to know that her mother hated her, and just it was very toxic, and it was very sad, and it was heartbreaking. And I will say that losing that baby was the most heartbreaking moment of my entire life. But I don't blame destiny, because I wouldn't be able to give away my child. So I understand what happened, and I understand, I think more than her, why she changed her mind, and I don't blame her. I can't blame her. And if I had that baby now, I might be in Portugal, but I probably wouldn't. I would have stayed in a job that I didn't love anymore, that I had grown to actually hate, and I would be working long hours. I was working 2 full-time jobs when I left the US, or before I left the US, and I would still be doing that so that I would be able to provide for the child. So I'm not saying that my life wouldn't still be beautiful in another way. I believe it would have, had I gone that route. I obviously didn't have the choice, but I wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm just wondering if there's anything in your life that you put off until it was too late. When I first decided to move to Portugal, I heard from some acquaintances that a woman that I had met only once was living here. And I didn't know this woman, but I'd met her again. I met her once, but I didn't know her at all. And I reached out to her and I asked her for help. But instead of telling me what to do or what she did, she told me to join a Facebook group and to do all my research there. And at the time I thought, wow, I really wonder why she won't help me. And I went to the Facebook group that she suggested, and I did all the research myself, and I did everything myself, and I made it happen myself. And I did everything myself. And it was really hard, and it took me a year, and I made it. And this is one thing that I offer, just plug myself, that I offer clients, is I help them move abroad, and I help them navigate all of the visa situation and the everything. What to do with my phone number, how do I make friends, whatever questions they might have. And I do have that available for you if you happen to be interested. If not, no problem. I have tons of free stuff, and you can research it all yourself as well, because that's what I did. And after I got here, I met with this woman in person, and I asked her why she had suggested that I go to the Facebook group instead of walking me through the steps herself. And she said, out of the dozens of people who have asked me for help, you are the only one who's actually moved here. And that was over a period of many years. I don't want to say many years, probably 5 years. Nobody else had moved there. And I get that now, because when I first moved here, I also had tons of people ask me, how do I do it? Can you walk me through the steps? And I did. I took that time, and this woman probably did too at the beginning. And I made spreadsheets for people, which I now offer to my clients, because they have an investment. They've made an investment in their future. And when you make an investment in your future, oftentimes you see it through. It's just the way the human mind works. But before I had my own clients, I did help, or try to help, numerous people move here, and none of them did. Not a single one. So I understand. My friend didn't want to waste her time. She figured if I wanted it badly enough, that I would make it happen for myself. And obviously I am here. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So there are a series of reasons that I commonly hear from people that stop them from moving forward. And a big one is fear. And I wrote about fear in depth in another article, which I will also link to. But maybe your fears are that you're afraid of not speaking the language. in the country that you're moving to. I also have an article about language learning that I will link to, and I can't link to it here. I'm pointing above in the video. I can't actually link to it here because it's a Substack article, but I did recently make a YouTube video about language learning, so I will link to that one. But the Substack article is pretty robust, and I have a huge Google spreadsheet to help you learn specifically Portuguese, if that's what you're interested in. But maybe your fear is that you're afraid of leaving your comfort zone. I also have an article about that I wrote for Substack. Maybe it is the dread of finding a new community, which I also wrote about, or moving solo, which I also wrote about. I have written articles about every single one of these, and I will link to them below. But whatever your fears are, I want you to know that they are valid. And perhaps it's a fear I haven't listed. It might be, it probably is. People are afraid of the overwhelm. They're afraid of minimizing. They're afraid of what their friends might say, friends and family. There are a lot of fears when it comes to moving abroad. And I get that. I see you. I hear you. I had all of those fears myself. But what I have to say about that is it's okay to feel afraid and then do the hard thing anyway. So I'm going to repeat that. It's okay to feel afraid and then do the hard thing anyway. There are fears of financial worries, leaving loved ones. Maybe if you have a career, you have career concerns, and even waiting for the right moment, as I mentioned in the opening section. The thing is, you will always have fears. Fear is part of human nature. It's what keeps us alive, like when a wild boar is chasing us while we're backpacking. That is a true story that actually did happen to me, though slightly embellished. Fear is what causes our split-second decision to maneuver our car out of the way when we're about to be T-boned by a teenager on her first joyride. Again, that is a personal account, and that is not embellished. And I was T-boned. When our fear stops us from moving forward in life, from exploring other options, that is when it becomes detrimental. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do or when to do it, because those are your personal choices. And those are choices that ultimately you must make for yourself. But I am here to push you a little, to ask you those hard questions, to allow you to look at your current situation differently and to encourage you to move ahead with your dreams anyway. One of my favorite things to talk about is anticipatory regrets, which is a fancy way of saying if you imagine your life in 5 years, 10 years, 1 year, and you haven't done the things that you most want to do, and we'll say in this case moving to another country, what regrets will you have? And I love this concept so much. Here are some sample questions that you can answer. Where do I envision myself in 5 years? What experiences do I hope to gain from living abroad? What aspects of my current life make me feel stagnant or unfulfilled? A few other issues or things that you will lose by putting your move off are time, energy, and opportunity, plus changing life's circumstances. Time, there are so many sayings about time. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time. Money comes and goes, but time always goes. Time is a non-renewable resource. And these sayings exist for a reason, and I'm sure I don't have to belabor the fact that none of us are getting any younger, maybe with the exception of Brian Johnson. Here's another saying. The time is now. Your time is now. So I recently had a YouTube video published on international living, and you can watch that. I'll link to it below, or I'll link to it above as well here. I don't think I can link to it above, but I will put the little graphic. And one of the comments that I got, because I moved to Portugal at the age of 56, was, 56 is young. And I get that, because the person who wrote that is older. And maybe they were looking at the video and they were in their 70s and they were thinking, wow, 56 is really young. I can't do it because I'm in my 70s. I know people in their 70s who have done it. People in their 70s who are doing it. I have clients in their 70s who are in the process of moving abroad, right? And I keep hearing from people that are in their 70s that have done it. I have a friend who's 10 years older than me, and she travels, actually I know two different women that travel full-time. They're full-time digital nomads, and they're both 10 years older than me. So I get it. I do. I understand that. I'm 59 now, and I talk a lot about how age is not a defining factor for me. I recently wrote an article about that. And I always say it wouldn't stop me from moving abroad, but the truth is, the older we get, the harder it becomes. And that is a fact. I know somebody who is in their late 80s and they're still living in the US. And she recently spoke to me about all of her regrets. And her biggest regret is not moving to Mexico when she had the chance. Because Mexico for her was the place she's always wanted to live. And now it's too late. She's got health issues. She's got a partner she has to take care of full time. And they're in dire straits health-wise, and they can't move. And it's devastating, right? Then we come to energy. Energy can fade with time, usually does, or with medical issues. And for me, energy has been an ever-changing fact. So I shouldn't say fact, it's been an ever-changing mode in my life. So when I was in acupuncture school in my 40s, I suffered from adrenal fatigue, and it left me with less energy than I actually have today. Okay, this is a long one, and maybe you're only halfway through, but it just keeps getting better. So please stick with me. I've got a lot more nuggets to drop. And if you're getting something out of this, I would love it if you would subscribe. When I wrote and published a novel a month for several years in my early 50s, which I do not recommend, I burnt out completely and I could barely function for 2 years. So I've learned not to push myself so hard. I still struggle with balance because there's so much to do, there's so much I want to do, so many different jobs that I have that I'm passionate about. Plus, I love travel and I go to the gym, well, a type of gym, and I do weightlifting, and I have an extremely energetic dog, and just everyday life, right? There's laundry, there's cooking, there's cleaning, there's doing the dishes, right? But the hard truth is that most of us lose energy as we get older. That is, I won't say it happens 100% of the time, but it's pretty common fact. And life often gets more complicated as we get older, especially with medical issues, both our own and the medical issues of our loved ones, right? So that happened to the person I already told you about. Personally, I would rather be in a country where I have amazing universal health care and I have better health care than I even ever dreamed of having, much better than I ever had in the US. And so I'm not afraid of aging out here in Portugal. I feel really safe doing that here. Look at the different countries that you might be interested in moving to and make sure that the healthcare wherever you're going, maybe you have to get private healthcare, health insurance, and look at the cost of that before you move. But make sure you know about that if you're older now. I do have another friend in her 70s, and she always spent half a year, 3 months, 6 months. If she did the Shangan Shuffle, she would spend 3 months in Paris, come back for 3 months and spend another 3 months in Paris. And she did this for over 10 years. And then she developed kidney disease and she had to go on dialysis. And because she was still an American citizen who only went to France on a tourist visa, she had to remain in the US for treatment. Very few people come out of dialysis or get off of dialysis. She recently had a kidney transplant, and she plans and hopes to be able to return to France. And maybe she can and maybe she can't. But What if she never had those 10 years of going back and forth? What if she never followed her dream of living in France part-time? She would always have that regret. I also have stories of people that I knew personally, quite a few, who could not afford the medical attention that they needed in the United States, and they died because of it. I hear stories constantly about others who couldn't receive proper medical treatment in America, but they ended up living in another country or even going to another country to receive the correct medical treatment that they needed at a fraction of the cost. And that they are now thriving either in another country or they went to another country to get what they needed done and they moved back to the US. But most of them live in other countries now. Moving abroad will build resilience and adaptability. The longer you remain on your comfortable couch watching Netflix, the harder it may be to leave. We become complacent. It's just human nature. And then one day bleeds into the next, that bleeds into the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. And we wake up and 20 years have passed us in seemingly the blink of an eye. And I say this because that's exactly what happened to me. I was married for almost 20 years. I was living in relative comfort. Looking back, I realized it was basically squalor, but I was comfortable. I was numbing out with drugs and alcohol. And when I finally woke up, and that's what I say, it felt as if gauze had covered my vision for over half my life, and then it cleared. It was like I was dreaming for 20 years. And I remember the exact moment because it was that profound. And once it happened, I couldn't go back. Once that gauze had cleared, I couldn't go back to the not knowing, to the eyes being covered. And back in the day, I described it as my blinders being removed. It was like that's how I saw it. Now I describe it as gauze, but back in the day I described it as I had blinders on and I couldn't see past this very small field of vision, and all of a sudden the blinders were removed and I was like, what? There's a whole world out here and it's completely different than the world I'm living, and it's better. I also think of it as an awakening, like I wasn't really experiencing my full potential, but I was going through life in a fog. And I'll tell you, it was a bad relationship, but it was comfortable because it's what I knew, right? And so the comfort of what you know oftentimes is less scary than the unknown. And I wasn't willing to step through that door into the unknown. It was too scary for me. I had a lot of fear until I didn't, until I was pushed so far into discomfort in my comfortable living situation. I was pushed to the point of breaking, and something had to change. And my hope for you is that it doesn't happen this way, that you don't get pushed that far, or if you do, that it happens sooner rather than later. Now, there are so many positive nuggets about moving abroad. There's so much you will learn. You'll change, most likely for the better. You'll collect unique life experiences, stories, new friendships. You'll develop important life skills. You'll learn more about yourself than you ever dreamed possible. And you will develop a global perspective and stop seeing wherever you live as the only place or the right place or the best place. Because I, and everyone I know, was taught that America is the greatest country in the world, and that is just simply not true. I'm not saying America's bad. I'm not going to say that. America has a lot of good qualities, but it has some of the worst healthcare available at ridiculous prices. America's economy is suffering painfully. But even before that, it had become an unaffordable place to live. And then there are the crazy safety issues. The U.S. has the highest overall rate of death from firearms, nearly 5 times higher than France, and 25 times higher than other high-income countries for firearm homicides. And of course, we all know about school shootings, mass shootings. There's a mass shooting all the time, a new one all the time. And now assassinations of political figures. It's like the Wild West. It really is. That stuff doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen in Portugal, I will say. I'm not saying there's not violence in other countries. Of course there is, but America is pretty high up there. I don't know the number. I think I want to say 38, but I will look. But it's not good. And in many other countries, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. In some countries, maybe there's more petty theft, pickpocketing, something like that. But violent assaults, there's a lot of countries where that just, yeah, there's fewer violent assaults and definitely less gun violence. Again, I'm not going to say every single country, but quite a few. I'm not going to tell you to push through or just do it anyway or go when you're not ready. But I will remind you that sometimes not being ready or not feeling ready is fear in disguise, because no one is ever 100% ready for a full life overhaul. So you don't have to leap off into the unknown right this second, but you can take baby steps that will propel you forward. The biggest, most important, and helpful thing I did before jumping was giving myself a time frame. So what is your realistic time frame? Don't wait for perfection, because perfection is a myth that keeps us stuck. It took me 15 years to finish writing my first novel because I wanted it to be perfect. And you know what? It wasn't. As a matter of fact, it was so bad that I never even published it, but I did finish writing it. And I had to finish writing it so that I could prove to myself that I could finish a novel. And that led me to write the next novel, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And now I have written over 30 novels. And I can hardly believe it myself, but the first 3 were terrible. And as a lot of authors say, they remain hidden under the bed. Figuratively, not literally. But my 4th one was actually really good. Good enough. It wasn't great. It was good enough. And I published it. And that's how I learned how to write novels. It was like getting an MFA in writing. And then I kept going. But do you know what changed everything for me? It was letting go of perfection. Waiting also can become a habit. And that's also what happened to me with my first book. I rewrote the first 50 pages for years, and I made them worse. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was making them better. But the truth is that I was afraid. I was afraid to fail. But failing is part of the journey. I have failed so many times at so many different things that I have lost count. I have had a number of entrepreneurial jobs that I have created. I'm an serial entrepreneur since I was 18 years old, which was my first entrepreneurial job. And I've had dozens since then. And some of them have become careers, and I've made a living in them, and a lot more than that have failed. And even now with my writing, years later, and 20 pretty decent novels published, I earn just enough to cover my monthly writing expenses. And that's okay. But I still don't count my novel writing career as a failure. But if I based it solely on my current earnings, it would absolutely be a fail. But what if instead I base it on the fact that I wrote over 30 novels, and published 20. And if someone else told me that, I would label them a rock star. So get comfortable with failure. Embrace it if you can. Welcome it in, because without failure, we rarely succeed. Failing is not the end-all be-all. It's not as scary as we think. We focus far too much energy on the negative outcomes before we learn to take them in stride. Yes, failing sucks, but learning to pick ourselves up off the ground and keep putting one foot in front of the other, that is success. So what if you fail at moving abroad? What if you go to France and you hate it? Guess what? You can leave. You can pivot. You can go to another country. You can try a different town. You could move back to your home country. You may even learn that you want to explore this big, gorgeous world for a while before you decide what country or what city feels right. The worst thing that can happen to you is that you've had a grand adventure. And if you try and you decide that living abroad isn't for you after all, you'll no longer be saddled with the what if I had, wondering, always wondering, what if. So please keep your momentum going. Research, network, start learning a new language, save your money, start looking for remote work, plan, dream, journal. And if you run into naysayers, I caution you to hold your tongue. I've got a couple food for thought questions to end this with. If not now, when? What would have to change for you to finally move? What are you really afraid of? Is it failure, loss, or the unknown? How would you feel if you never did it? What do you stand to gain if you go? What do you stand to lose if you don't? What's the worst thing that could happen, and could you handle it? What's the best thing that could happen? If you've made it to the end of this podcast, you'll know that waiting for perfect circumstances is a myth. Life will always throw up new obstacles, new excuses, and new fears, but the cost of waiting is real. Lost time, lost energy, and the risk of waking up someday with more regrets than memories. You don't have to be 100% ready. You probably won't be. You don't need to have every detail mapped out or every fear conquered. What you do need is a willingness to move forward one baby step at a time. Give yourself permission to be imperfect, to learn as you go, and to embrace the discomfort that comes with growth and change. Imagine your life 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Will you be glad that you waited? Or will you wish that you had started sooner? Only you can answer that. But here's what I know. The world is waiting, and your adventure doesn't begin with a leap. It starts with a single, imperfect step. So start your researching, your planning, your dreaming out loud, set a timeline, hold yourself accountable, surround yourself with people who support your vision, because the only thing standing between someday and now is action. Your future self is already cheering you on, and so am I. So give us all a story that's worth telling. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you were here. If you got something out of this, please subscribe. I would love that. And I do have a newsletter with a lot of freebies if you're interested to help you move abroad. And if you sign up, you'll also be signing up to my Substack, so you'll get your free weekly articles. And I really appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.